Thank you, and hello everyone, and thank you for attending Just Recovery Simcoe's All Candidates meeting for Barrie Innisfil. My name is Deb McGrath. For this debate, we are thankful for the endorsement of several community groups, including Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, Living Green Barrie, Engage Barrie, Innisfil District Association, Aware Simcoe, Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance, and Reform Gravel Mining Coalition. Quite a list. Mm-hmm. We have organized these debates because the outcome of this election will set the course for our province for years to come. With many people struggling daily with inequity growing, poverty rates rising, the climate crisis becoming more pressing by the day, Just Recovery Simcoe wanted to present a debate that is focused on these issues and the solutions that parties are committing to. Today's candidates are vying for the opportunity to take this matter seriously and advocate on behalf of our shared environment and social determinants of health at the provincial level. We can no longer afford policies that exacerbate climate breakdown or hurt the health of our communities and the people within them. The time for action is now. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous territories in which we are situated. We are gathering in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, Anishinaabeg people. Locally, we would like to honor the Chippewas Tri-Council, the First Nations of Rama, Georgina Island, and Beausoleil Island, and acknowledge that their ancestors were first stewards of these lands. Via the Williams Treaty and others, agreements were made that lands were meant to be shared and in a way that honors nature and the life that we have been given. History and present day issues clearly demonstrate that we are not living up to this intention or promise. To have hope for future generations, we must recognize the value in each other and reconcile for past and ongoing tragedies and ensure compassionate care and concern for all. Further, we must recognize that the various components of our ecosystem, air, land, water, flora, and fauna, are all interdependent and need to work in harmony. The only way forward is together. As potential members of provincial parliament, we ask our candidates to uphold choices and policies that address truth and reconciliation in a genuine way. I'd like to now review the meeting structure, and please note 4 parties were invited, but PC candidate Andrea Khanjin declined our invitation. Each of the candidates have been briefed, and there are a few rules for debates, as there always are. But each of the candidates have been briefed, and I'm going to briefly run through those again. And here's the rules. Each candidate will be asked to answer 7 preset questions, and they were shared in advance prior to the debate. The first question is a rapid fire, where candidates will only be able to answer in a set yes, no, or unsure answer, and that is a non-verbal answer, and I'll record those answers and play them back verbally. We will then select questions from the audience after the 7 are addressed. And to submit a question, please use the Q&A feature in the menu. Questions must be addressed to all candidates, and we strive to be respectful and pertain to the concerns of the debate. For each question, candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond. We will notify the candidates at the 10-second remaining mark, and Adam's going to do that with a shout out. Once the time has expired, the candidate will be muted and I will announce the next candidate's turn. Before the meeting, organizers randomly selected the order of who will be answering the questions and in what order. I think Margaret had a lot of fun doing that, the randomizer. And at the end of each question, the candidates will be asked if they would like to rebut. And here's the fun part. Each candidate has just 2 rebuttal opportunities that they can use at any point during the debate. So after every question, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to rebut, but only once per question and only 2 in the entire debate. Is that clear? I hope it is. And then each candidate will have 2 minutes for their rebuttal. Are there any questions that we didn't address in the pre-briefing or I haven't addressed now? We're good? Excellent, thank you. Finally, we urge each of you to encourage others to vote and to put the health and the well-being of our communities and planet at the forefront of your decision. This meeting is being recorded and the final video will be available on Just Recovery Simcoe's YouTube channel. Thank you to all of the candidates for their community service. We wish them all the best in their campaigns. We're going to start with our introductions, and we have 1 minute each, and that randomizer came up with this order. For this component, we're going to start with John Olthuis.
Yes, thank you. That was a lovely introduction, I must say, but I'll talk about myself here to introduce myself. I'm John Olthuis. I've been in the community, Barrie Innisfil community for over 37 years. My background is in corporate communications, marketing. I've been active in the community as far as working with the Chamber of Commerce, with David Busby Center. I've been involved also with the Classic Car Club. I'm actually the president of Barrie Thunder Classics, and we work with Innisfil Beach Cruisers and so on to get out into the community. Active downtown. You know, I've have a strong interest for the area. We're not going to move, and I am retired, so I do have full opportunity to give this my all.
10 seconds.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, so I will welcome. I'm late to the plate as far as the election is concerned, but I'll pick up speed very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next introduction goes to Pekka Reinio.
Thanks, Deb. Hey, we're on the cusp of a rapid transition to a low-carbon future with reduced emissions, many well-paying jobs in the renewable energy sector, construction, the caring economy, and ultimately a brighter future for our children. I know that climate change weighs heavily on young people and their parents. It weighs heavily on me, but we can't move quickly to a low-carbon future while at the same time addressing inequality, poverty, and racism for a just recovery. We have the understanding and a technology already at hand. What we need are leaders that will work with all stakeholders, such as Rescue Lake Simcoe, the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, and others to harness their expertise. We need leaders with a political will to usher in a more prosperous and fair low-carbon future. And that's why this election on June 2nd is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Pekka. Bonnie North, please. You're on mute, Bonnie.
I'm Bonnie North, and I've proudly made Barrie my home for the past 23 years. I've always been a politically engaged advocate for fairness and justice. For example, while living in Washington, D.C. and barely a teenager, my classmates and I spent our lunch times watching the Watergate hearings on the cafeteria TV, and we opposed the Vietnam War. And for years, I volunteered in our community on behalf of several local organizations, including Living Green, the Canadian Association for Retired Persons, and Barrie Proud. Barrie Pride, and now I'm a founding member of Barrie's Urban Pantry and the Simcoe County Food Council, both of which work to enable food security, food literacy, and strong local food systems. My husband and I shared the joy of raising our son, and I'm committed to ensuring that he and his husband inherit a healthy planet. That's why I'm standing for the Ontario Greens in Barrie Innisfil, and why I'm pleased to be here with you today.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you all. Excellent. All right, we're ready to move on to the first question. And just a quick reminder about this. These are rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask each one of them, and I'm going to ask you to please give your responses non-verbally. So yes, no, or unsure. And I will record them and verbally repeat them for the benefit of our audience. Okay, everybody ready? And I believe I have permission to use your first names now that you've given your introductions. All right, we're going to start to our first question. Do you support reinstatement of the Environmental Commissioner's Office of Ontario? That's a yes all around. Thank you. Next question. Do you support municipal ranked ballots? Thank you. Do you support implementing a wealth tax? Thank you. Do you support implementing a basic universal income? Do you support raising the minimum wage? And for the benefit of our audience, this is yes for the first 5 questions from each of our candidates. On the 6th question, will you raise supports for OW, Ontario Works, ODSP, above the poverty line, and index to inflation? Do you need me to repeat that? Okay, we have yes from all 3 candidates. Will you support a moratorium on all new gravel mining approvals in Ontario? That is a yes from all 3 candidates. Will you reinstate Ontario's Child Advocate Office? That is a yes from all 3 candidates. Will you strengthen the funding and mandates of conservation authorities? Thank you. That is a yes from all 3 candidates. Will you strengthen protection for endangered species and wetlands? And that is a yes from all 3 candidates. Will you strengthen the protection of the Lake Simcoe Act to discourage sprawl and ensure we have 40% high quality natural cover around the lake? And that is a yes from all 3 candidates. Will you stop the construction of Bradford Bypass and other 400 series highways in the Greenbelt? And that is a yes. Thank you. That was the rapid fire first question. Do we have a rebuttal for any of these questions being asked? And Pekka has raised his hand, and yes, he'd like to rebut on a specific question or just a general rebuttal. And you have 2 minutes, Pekka.
Well, hey, I'm just curious about John's position on the Bradford bypass, because I know the Liberals have said that they would kill 413 as the rest of us have, but I haven't heard him say anything about the Bradford bypass. And I know that I don't speak on behalf of the NDP on my own. Like, I'm here today to represent the NDP, and our position is against the Bradford bypass. So I just wonder what the Liberal position on that one is, please.
John, can you respond to that? And you are on mute, please.
Yeah.
And you have 2 minutes.
My phone on. Bear with me. But yeah, thank you for that, Pekka. I know I've gone on record, even through Twitter, before I even decided to become a candidate, was that I actually encouraged the bypass. And my personal rationale was that living in Barrie and Innisfil, and if the area wants to develop properly and with proper transit, that you would need a bypass to get around Bradford. Now the Liberals right now have gone on record to say that because it was, I think it was in 2002, they actually canceled the environmental assessment in 2003, basically canceling the project. So as I understand right now, the policy from the Liberal Party is that it will be stopped.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Rebuttal to the rebuttal, Pekka, or shall we move forward?
No, I appreciate the response, John. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you both. On to question 2, in which you have 1.5 minutes. I will set up the speaker order. I think you have it, but I'm going to give it to you up front so that you're ready. The speaker order is Bonnie, followed by John, and then Pekka. Here's the background, and here's the question. Our water health, from wetlands to Lake Simcoe to groundwater, is under increasing pressure from climate impacts, as well as sprawl and aggregate. To protect it, it will require all levels of government to do more than it has historically done, including intervening on projects that are a direct threat. Here's the question. What are you going to do to protect our water systems? Starting with Bonnie, please. 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, a minute and a half. Sorry, Bonnie.
We have to do everything in our power to preserve our wetlands, our aquifers, and the places that shield us from extreme weather events like flooding. Moreover, we need to defend our water's health from pollution and save our waters from the destruction of unnecessary overdevelopment. Ford's sprawl agenda always comes before the safeguarding of our environment, always. For example, Highway 413 is a gift to Ford's rich developer pals. He claims to protect our watersheds, except that Highway 14 threatens 75 wetlands, 28 of which are provincially designated as significant. And meanwhile, we're going to all pay billions just so drivers can shave 30 to 60 seconds off their commutes. Greens will double the size of the existing Greenbelt to include a protected blue belt, bringing the entire area to 3.6 million acres. The blue belt will include the headwaters of and the entire Grand River through Haldimand County and permanently protect moraines, rivers, lakes, and other important wetlands, including the Paris Galt Moraine, Duffins Creek, Carruthers Creek, Lake Simcoe, and Georgian Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. John, 1.5 minutes, please.
Okay, I'll be short. Personally, I consider myself an environmentalist as well. I have solar on my house and batteries. But as far as like the watershed, our policy is that we're going to increase the amount of land by 30% as far as and expand the green belt as well. The idea again was the 413, as Bonnie pointed out. It's there's no real purpose for this highway. It's going through farmland. Essentially, it's for developers. I believe that's the only reason I could see to put a highway in that direction, and it's not going to improve people getting downtown at all. As far as the canceling, we want to cancel the bypass, as I mentioned earlier. And personally, I lived in Oro-Medonte and in Sugarbush, and the Oro Moraine is something spectacular. And I think both Pekka and Bonnie can attest to that the water there is so pure and so wonderful. But there's gravel being taken out of that moraine, and every day, you think about what's this going to do to our aquifers. So I personally want to
10 seconds.
Oh, thank you. I personally want to meet with municipalities as well to just see what they're doing to improve, basically sewage treatment. I know.
Thank you, John. I believe you have been muted and you've taken your 1.5 minutes. So thank you. Pekka, to you, please.
Thank you. Hey, Lake Simcoe and our watershed are directly under attack from the Ford government with their plans to expand highways directly through the green belt, farm fields, and right over Lake Simcoe, but they're trying to expand municipal boundaries as well, as we've seen in Hamilton. But here too, with the unprecedented use of MZOs, they're also demanding lower density requirements, which would encourage urban sprawl, all of which will put more pressure on our lakes. I can tell you that the NDP will not be using MZOs to override official growth plans, which encourage more urban sprawl. In fact, we will restore the powers of independent conservation authorities to protect people, homes, and habitats from flooding, soil, and water contamination. We need more homes, lots of them, but we must stick to our urban boundaries as outlined in our provincial growth plan, while still providing starter homes that young families can afford. This will require the end of exclusionary zoning, as we've promised on page 1 of our election platform. You know, I remember when I first moved to Innisfil and bought my first home for $115,000. I think I had $5,000 saved. My parents gave me a few $1,000s, and then I used a credit card for the rest of the down payment. Those kind of opportunities aren't available any longer. This is another reason why we're going to end exclusionary zoning to allow for the missing middle, more starter homes, and low rises.
Thank you, Pekka. Do we have a rebuttal for question number 2? It is optional. Anyone? Pekka and John have one left. Bonnie has 2. Any rebuttals, or we're hanging on to them? They're like gold cards. Good. All right. Question number 3. Again, I'll give you the speaker order. Speaker order is Pekka, followed by Bonnie, then John. Here's the background and the question. The International Panel on Climate Change has made it clear that swift and deep changes are needed to ensure a future livable planet, specifically around reducing fossil fuel infrastructure, preserving nature, changing land use, and transportation patterns. Here's the question. How will your government rise to the challenge to avert a climate crisis as much as possible? Starting with Pekka, please.
I believe we can tackle this climate crisis. We have all the tools we need to do so, and I'm very proud of our NDP Green New Deal that was released a year ago on Earth Day, inspired by the work of Naomi Klein. We have aggressive and realistic targets in our plan, cutting Ontario emissions at least 50% by 2030. And we're going to start by bringing back renewable energy to Ontario. So that means more solar, wind, and geothermal projects, all of which Doug Ford cut in his early days as Premier. I think he cut 700 plus jobs or projects. So now with the Pickering nuclear plant set to close in 3 years, we're going to really need to ramp up our renewable energy resources. One thing we're also going to do is cut emissions through our ambitious retrofit program, which we announced last week, which will provide homeowners with rebates and interest-free loans to renovate and retrofit their homes so they can move towards net zero emissions. We're also going to upload 50% of municipal transit costs, which will allow municipalities to beef up their public transit. Of course, EVs are also part of the solution. We need to build EVs here in Ontario. We need charging stations available in public spaces. And we need to make sure that charging stations are roughed into all new home builds as part of the building code. You know, there's lots going on, lots of concerning events unfolding around the world, but we can't be distracted and back away from climate change initiatives. As we heard at a recent UN conference, once built, clean energy systems are more
My apologies. I think I am, I am unmuted. Thank you. Sorry, Bonnie, you're next. 1.5 minutes, please. Did you need me to repeat the question? I think you already have it, though.
No, I've got the question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So these days, the term climate change is too weak to convey how close we are to the planetary tipping points. Meanwhile, in Ontario, Ford not only canceled $230 million of renewable energy projects, but is making things worse, for example, by ramping up gas plants. This will increase emissions by 300% in the next 10 years and 500% in the next 20. But there's good news. Clean energy isn't isn't just the future, it's the present. It's cheaper, more feasible, and more accessible than ever before. Moreover, preserving nature makes our lives better and gives us the resources we need to survive. Protecting it through smart land use is critical. Let's rapidly address the looming climate catastrophe. Among many actions, Greens will transition smoothly to renewables from fossil fuels and make Ontario a leader in the new climate economy. Through our Green Building Program, we'll create thousands of jobs and save families and businesses money on energy bills, improve our air quality, and reduce our healthcare costs, and will urgently move away from more highways and cars on roads and toward affordable and accessible electrified transit. That's not all. We Greens are the environmental advocates in Ontario. To find out more, go to gpo.ca to see our fully costed platform and see how we tackle the climate emergency.
Thank you, Bonnie. John, to you.
Yes, thank you. I think Bonnie, Pekka, and I are all on the same page. Primarily, I wish there was a conservative representative here at the table, because I actually lived through the cancellations. I worked for the electric utility, and I saw hundreds of coworkers losing their jobs that were in the energy management aspect of our company. We're launching all kinds of programs for EV, energy storage, and so on, green programs, and all of those were canceled. So as far as, we're looking at the cancellation of the highways, as we talked earlier. That's the number one thing that has to stop right now. Now, the one thing we've introduced is the $1 transit. The concept there, people are saying buck a beer. Should have said maybe $2 would have been easier to sell. But the point is, it's going to get people familiar with using the GO train to go to Toronto. Instead of driving down the highways, they'll take the GO train because it's $1 and one way and $1 back, $40 a month. So people have the opportunity to actually experience using the GO train, and it'll make sense. And hopefully then it will stay on, and maybe there will be some other incentives. As far as other green EVs and storage and charging stations, that's already started. I know one electric utility is now working with the government.
Thank you, John. Any rebuttals for question number 3? Any rebuttals? All right, moving on to question number 4. And here's the speaker order, starting with John, then Pekka, then Bonnie. Here's the question. How will you implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? 1.5 minutes, starting with John, please. And you are on mute, John. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
There it goes. Okay. Yes, thank you for that. As we're looking at the Indigenous people, we are living essentially on their land. It is something that we have to treat with regard and respect, this land that we're using. The key is, I guess, the federal government is putting $2.2 billion over 5 years to try and get the program through. Again, to support the violence against women and girls. I think as far as Indigenous rights and expressing the opinions, I've always been a supporter, and I feel that, and I'm speaking more personally, that we need to do more of what we can, both for housing and so on. I've driven through some of the reserves, some of the properties. They're trying to improve what they're doing, introducing gas stations, becoming business people. I think it's wonderful, but I think there's more we can do to promote Indigenous rights and bring some of these things forward.
Thank you, John. Next up is Pekka, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone was able to attend the sacred fire ceremonies this year at Springwater Park or at the Spirit Catcher over the past year, when thousands of Indigenous children were found buried in mass grave sites across the country. It was tragic. I did attend the Sacred Fires, and they were really heartbreaking ceremonies, as were the stories told by Tanya Talaga, who wrote 7 Fallen Feathers about my childhood home, Thunder Bay. So my first step in the calls to action on the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is to learn and understand the history and the racism faced by Indigenous peoples in Canada, to which I've committed to learning about and understanding. And under the leadership and guidance of Sol Mamakwa, NDP MPP for Kawittanong near Sioux Lookout, First Nations and Inuit and Métis people in Ontario will no longer be ignored. And Ontario NDP government will work in true nation-to-nation relationships to recognize and uphold the full rights of Indigenous people. The NDP is committed to implementing the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and ensure the Indigenous peoples in Ontario are treated equitably under the law. The NDP is also committed to addressing the suicide crisis among First Nations youth. And I'm committed to working with Indigenous communities across Simcoe County to ensure that the same mental health supports that we're providing under OHIP are also being extended to Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Pekka. Bonnie.
From 1962 to 1970, the Dryden, Ontario pulp mill dumped 10 tons of untreated mercury into the English Wabigoon River. That river runs through the Grassy Narrows Indigenous communities. The National Observer wrote about just some of the incalculable tragedies of this poisoning, including little Frida Jane Kokokopenes. Born in May 1964, Frida Jane was sick from birth, being fed a homemade formula of canned milk and Wabigoon River water. Her mother, Brenda, remembers the day an ambulance came to take her 2-month-old baby girl to the hospital. That was the last day Brenda saw Frida Jane alive. Brenda blames herself, but Brenda's not to blame. Environmental racism is. The systemic racism that Indigenous peoples face results in a violation of the most basic human rights, like access to clean water. It's only through confronting the truth about these shameful realities, the history of residential schools, white supremacy, and our colonialism, can we even begin to address these atrocities. Greens will definitely implement UNRIP and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations. By uplifting Indigenous voices and working together, we can build a better society. There is so much we have to offer to address this issue. So please go to gpo.ca to learn exactly how Greens will work to right these wrongs.
Thank you, Bonnie. We have a rebuttal from Pekka for this question number 4. And you have 2 minutes, Pekka. And just a reminder, this is your last rebuttal.
Thank you. Hey, as an educator, I just wanted to point out that I'm also committed to working with Indigenous peoples to introduce culturally appropriate, mandatory Indigenous curriculum within our schools, which the Ford government cut days after being elected in 2018. I agree with Bonnie. We need to act immediately to end boil water advisories across Ontario and work with the federal government to fund needed water infrastructure in First Nations communities, and of course, clean up Grassy Narrows. So if elected as your MPP for Barrie Innisfil, I'm going to be committed to seeking justice for Indigenous peoples within our community and across Ontario and standing up for their rights by working together and uplifting Indigenous peoples and voices here in Barrie Innisfil and at Queen's Park with members of Parliament like Sol Mamakwa. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Pekka. Bonnie, do you have a rebuttal for that, or you want to move forward?
I wasn't aware that was directed at me. Okay, no.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to question number 5. And here's our speaker order: Bonnie, then John, then Pekka. And here is the background and the question. We continue to have too many citizens unhoused or with precarious housing. What measures would you take to ensure housing as a right? How would you pair this with efforts to make housing more affordable for all? Starting with Bonnie, please. 1.5 minutes.
We Greens envision a world where everyone has a place to call home and where the color of your skin, your age, or if you have a disability, doesn't prevent you from living in health and dignity. Greens will build livable and affordable communities that work for everyone without wantonly paving over green space and wetlands. When we introduced our housing plan last June, the Toronto Star called it a masterclass in housing policy. So some of the ways we'll do this is by building 122,000 affordable units accessible for people of all ages and abilities, by putting people before speculators and ensuring security and stability for renters, by creating more pathways to home ownership, and by extending the lifespan of the existing supply, by building secondary suites, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyard apartments, and mid-rise apartment buildings, and by extending income support to more Ontario households. This province needs the political courage to create more pathways to home ownership, and Greens intend to step up and make it happen. We can ensure everyone has a place to call home. We Greens believe everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, because homelessness is never an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next, the question goes to John.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, like, as far as housing is concerned, the Barrie Innisfil area, and it's all over the world, actually, the housing prices have gone through the roof, and particularly with rental. I see our party's looking at a single rent control process, that we can actually bring back rent controls and get things managed. Right now, when there's a sale of a home, rent can be increased. It can go from $1,700 a month to $2,500 a month. There has to be some control between the transition from either an owner to another owner, and so on and so forth. Puts tenants at risk. We want to build more housing, and as Bonnie said, you have to do it in such a manner that it doesn't impact the environment, or, as Pekka has mentioned, as far as where the designated areas are. We can't go beyond, we have to have a plan and make sure that it goes through correctly, and that the housing and so on is not considered a negative place to live. You have to be and have like a pride of ownership, or a pride of living in the facility that you're at. And we have to encourage that as well. We don't want people living in little tiny cabins and all crashed together.
Seconds.
And I guess one of the other things we're looking at doing is taxing vacant homeowners. So if they're basically sitting there.
Thank you, John. Pekka.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Deb. Hey, I've been outdoor knocking since November, and housing costs and rent are the top issue in our riding. And unfortunately, Doug Ford's government hasn't passed a single piece of legislation to address the housing and rental crisis in our area. In fact, they've made it worse by removing rental controls and allowing for rent evictions. People I've talked to are paying thousands in rent each month, always worried about being evicted with no kind of ability to save for a down payment. And I know because I was a renter up until 2 years ago, and I was always worried that rent was going to be jacked up or that we would be evicted. Then my next worry was, where would we move, and would I have to uproot my kids from their school? We have to put in place measures to support renters, because housing is a human right. We also need to build many, many more homes. We have to enforce a foreign buyers tax and an empty home tax. Also, not everyone can afford market rate homes. So there's a place for public housing, a public affordable housing, which we will also build, as well as supportive housing for people, not for investors. As I stated earlier, we'll end exclusionary zoning, increasing the supply of housing options that are affordable in communities where people want to live, while preventing costly sprawl. I think that's going to spur over 1 million homes being built over the next 10 years, a mix of starter homes, purpose-built rentals, and affordable housing units.
Thank you, Pekka. Rebuttal for question number 5 on housing. Anyone for a rebuttal? Okay. Oh, Pekka, I'm sorry. I believe you have none left.
I was going to steal one of Bonnie's rebuttals.
All right. We're going on and moving on to question number 6. And the speaker order is Pekka, then Bonnie, and then John. 80% of our health outcomes are tied to the social determinants of health, such as income, what we just talked about, housing, transportation, health of the environment, food security, racism and discrimination, and access to education. Here's the question. What are your 3 main priorities to address the social determinants of health for everyone? Starting with Pekka, please.
I wish we had more than 3 to choose from. However, education, as we all know, is a fundamental part of our children's development. It's so important to their future well-being and success. It's also a key part of the social and economic health of our communities and our province. We will work to reverse Ford's cuts to the education budget. We'll hire more teachers and support staff and invest in school remedial learning programs. We will lower class sizes so students are able to receive the help that they need. We're also going to ensure that de-streaming is implemented properly with staff input and motor support so that all kids can succeed. You know, Annie Kidder is the director of People for Education, and they released a report, I think it was on Friday, saying that the de-streaming program put forward by the Ford government has not put in place the training and supports required for a positive rollout. 30% of principals says they have not been well prepared for the rollout in September. We need to make sure that de-streaming is done properly and funded properly. We're also going to increase funding for students with special education needs, helping teachers and education assistants give children the support they need. So education is number 1. Number 2 is poverty reduction programs such as ODSP.
10 seconds.
ODSP, we will raise $200 immediately and tied to inflation, but I would like to see that raised to CERB levels. And of course.
Thank you, Pekka. To our next speaker, Bonnie, please, for this question.
Picking 3 priorities not already mentioned, I'd focus on the following. Number 1, truly respect workers. Saying we honor our frontline workers is meaningless unless our government actually treats them like the heroes they are. Workers deserve much more than they're getting paid, and when they're sick, they shouldn't feel forced to go to work just to keep earning their wages. Moreover, nurses and PSWs deserve better. Greens will increase paid sick days to 10, do away with sick notes, repeal Bill 124, and remove the cap on nurses' wages, and meaningfully increase the wages, staffing, and professional supports for PSWs. 2, stop legislating poverty. Disadvantaged Ontarians shouldn't have to choose between paying rent or feeding their families. To provide everyone the support they need, the power to make their own choices, and the dignity they deserve, Greens will immediately double ODSP rates and institute universal basic income. And 3, rebalance healthcare. Greens will focus on primary and community healthcare, put mental health care on OHIP, and improve the outcomes of racialized communities which are disproportionately affected by COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. John, to you, please.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I wish I'd like to pick, several, actually, every one of those aspects. I basically picked housing, health of the environment, access to education. The one thing that really, personally, my sister actually has PSW. She's handicapped and lives independently, which is lovely. But we have PSWs coming in twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening to put her to bed. She lives close. I moved her up here so that I can assist. But what we need is access to, let's say, through one place, like a health unit or something where we can actually get to all these different supports, regardless of income, status, or whatever. You go to a facility where you can get everything from, I'm talking massage, from a physical therapy aspect, as far as drug plans and organizing things, as far as people with disabilities. They need a lot of support. And maybe that's a little close to me, but I think it impacts a lot of people, both in Barrie and Innisfil. I'm sorry, my phone, I thought I shut it off. But it is very important. Again, with the access to education, I think that's very important. As far as the children daycare, getting people we're going to work with the federal government to get daycare to the $10 a day point so that people can work properly, be healthy.
Thank you, John. For question number 6, are there any rebuttals?
I didn't get to answer.
I'm sorry, Pekka.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to answer that question yet.
You didn't get to, my apologies.
That's okay. Hey, COVID has really exposed the cracks throughout our society, and we need to invest more in our social services and our safety net. So ODSP must be increased. We're going to raise minimum wage $1 every year for the next 5.
Oh, we're not on that question. We're not on that question yet. She hasn't posed it yet. Sorry.
We're just doing the rebuttal. Thank you for the interjection, Margaret. You were first on question number 6. So you've answered that, the 3 main priorities. I'm sorry, we didn't hear them all. And we're on to the next question, but are there any rebuttals for question number 6? Any rebuttals? All right. Seeing none, we'll go forward. This is our last question. And our speaker order is John, then Pekka, then Bonnie. And here's the question and the background. The COVID-19 pandemic has further revealed the racial, economic, and social inequalities in our society. How do you propose to address these inequities? Starting with John, please. John, you're on mute.
I'll get a handle. It's only the last question, so I finally figured it out. But but COVID-19, you know, I'll read the question again. COVID-19 pandemic has further revealed the racial, economic, and social inequities in our society. Personally, I think it impacts, as it says, like just not just inequities. I think and I find that hard. I struggle with because it impacted everybody equally, even the rich and so on. My problem is that the people that didn't choose to follow the science, I think we have to better educate people. When people are marching, this is totally me, this is not the party, but when people are marching on Ottawa and they don't understand the science. So we have to better educate everybody that when dealing with something, a pandemic of this magnitude, they have to wise up. And they have to understand that the science is there and that we have to do things. And if that impacts the different social levels, we have to be able to provide the materials to people so they understand and take the drugs, make facilities available that they can come and get it or bring the facilities to them, which they have been trying to do with the buses and so on. So I can't criticize them 100%, but I think there's more that can be done.
10 seconds.
And I'm looking forward to the Liberal government to bring some of these things further out to these different people so they can adjust. And
thank you, John. Pekka.
Sorry about that earlier. Hey, we need to invest more in our social services and our safety nets. ODSP needs to be increased. We have committed to a $200 immediate increase. I'd like to see it raised to $2,000 CERB levels. We need to increase minimum wage, which we will do $1 every year for the next 5 years to get it up to $20. We need to remove profit from long-term care. We saw the disastrous results in for-profit long-term care, including here in Barrie at Roberta Place. We need to start making long-term care non-profits. We also need to invest more in home care. Seniors want to stay at home longer. We need to ensure that they have support so that they can stay at home longer before moving to long-term care. We've been calling nurses heroic for the last 2 years, and yet the Ford government has capped their wages with Bill 124 at 1%. We need to be able to allow nurses to negotiate a fair wage. We're losing nurses. They're feeling discouraged and unappreciated. Repealing Bill 124 will be one of our first measures if elected. We need to bring in real paid sick days. This is something that experts have been calling on throughout the pandemic so that if people are sick, they can stay home. If their children are sick, they can stay home and take care of them. So 10 real paid sick days would be an important next step for our government.
And to Bonnie for question number 7, please.
COVID put our world on pause and forced us to re-examine the ways we live, work, and play. The path we were on was neither sustainable nor just, but we have an enormous opportunity to reboot our lives and shape our world for generations to come. So let's choose a new path. Let's re-energize climate action with good green jobs, restore dignity for elders, uphold our workers, rebalance healthcare, protect and empower Black, Indigenous, and racialized people, reimagine our cities and our neighborhoods, support local businesses, protect our food, water, and biodiversity, care for our children, and take care of each other with universal basic income. There's so much that Greens have to offer, and I'm so excited to say we introduced our platform today. So please go to gpo.ca and see the myriad of practical, accessible, and costed solutions that Ontario Greens offer to address racial, economic, and social inequities in our society. And when we think about inequity, I want you to remember two notable quotes. Nina Turner says, "Poverty is a policy choice." And Rutger Bregman says, "Poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash." Let's do
10
what's
seconds.
right. Vote for me, Bonnie North, the green choice to make those things happen.
Thank you all. Rebuttal for question 7. Pekka, I'm sorry you're out of those gold cards. John, you have one left, and Bonnie's coveting her 2.
I thought I had 2, but my response was to Pekka, but that's okay. So I guess I used 1 to respond to Pekka. But no, you know what? I just want to put a shout out there to like both Bonnie and Pekka. I did hear about this debate, late as I just became a candidate. But I just want to say, go on record of saying both Bonnie and Pekka really, they put their work into this, and the responses were wonderful. I think we all have a lot of things on the same page, so it will be difficult for everybody, to choose a candidate. But I think it's very important that we have a Green Party option, we have the NDP option, and we have a Liberal option. That's it. No, but it's choose one of us, and I think that the opportunity is we stand for the same thing, I think, in most cases, but let's do something to improve the province. I think that's very important, and vote for who you feel is best going to do the job in Barrie Innisfil. So focus on that rather than a leader and so on, but let's get going.
Thank you, John. All right, that concludes the preset questions. We've done 7 questions. We're into the last part of it now, and that is audience questions. And we've got some great ones here. These questions, I wanted to assure you, have been vetted. Thank you to Margaret and Adam for relevance, decorum, and ability to be posed to each of you. So here's how this works. You will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the 3 questions that have been selected from the submitted audience questions. You can use your rebuttal if you have any remaining. Bonnie's hanging on to hers. And if you have questions that were not answered here tonight, I encourage you to reach out to your candidates personally. So again, to our audience specifically. If you have questions that were not answered here tonight, I encourage you to reach out to candidates personally. All right, let me flip into my list here. Oh my goodness, we've got quite a few of them. I think we've got 3.
I put them into your chat, Deb. If you
Oh,
go
thank
into
you.
the direct message, I put them into there.
And I am looking for those.
At the chat at the bottom.
Yep, no, I'm just looking for the questions. All right, so here's audience question number 1, and I believe we've got Bonnie, then John, and then Pekka is our lineup. And here's our audience question number 1. And thank you to, I believe it was Marlene who submitted this. Here's a question. Thank you to all the candidates here for the respect you've shown the public and the democratic process by not only showing up, but also representing or presenting rather your ideas and giving us all much to think about as we decide our upcoming votes. Unfortunately, the candidates who have had scheduling issues for every all candidates meeting to date are the same incumbents for whom we've received numerous complaints about not being available or answering communications from their constituents. And Margaret, if I'm in the right spot here, I'm going to try and finish this. And I believe the question is, if elected, what will you do to ensure your constituents continue to have a voice after election day and encourage public engagement with yourselves and the provincial government? So I'm going to repeat that question because there was a long lead into that. If elected, what will you do to ensure your constituents continue to have a voice after election day and encourage public engagement with yourselves and the provincial government? That's, I think, the question. And we're going to start with Bonnie, please.
Hi, thank you so much for this question. It is really on point. It's really a shame that the people that were elected to represent us are not here representing us. And, you know, while we can sort of surmise what their thoughts and policies are, it's really nice to hear it coming directly from them. So it's a missed opportunity for them and for us. So, you know, as a Green MPP, one, I am not whipped by my party, and therefore I am here to represent the constituents of this riding. So what matters to my constituents matters to me. If there is something that doesn't jive with what Greens would normally be doing, then it's my responsibility to explain to my constituents why that is important and try to reach consensus on getting there. And it's my duty to be engaged. And I don't know what more to say. I certainly would show up for all candidates meetings and any other public or private communications, because we need to do that. So I don't know what more to say, except that I'm glad that we're all here. I want to congratulate all of the candidates that are here today and the Just Recovery team. And it's really too bad that we're missing one of the main political parties.
Thank you, Bonnie. This question is now posed to you, John.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I came into this campaign very late. I'm actually using my personal phone number and my personal email address, and my home is basically my office. And we did a prescriptive dialer to go out and reach with people, and I must have received probably 500 phone calls back. And I've been calling people back because they're seeing last number called. I've been talking to people and actually getting a good feel for what's going on in the area. And I want to continue doing that. And my background is customer service, and for over 30 years. So I know how to speak with people, listen to people. The key is to listen and then bring that forward. Like if it's a little bit different idea from the party, and what I've learned about the party is they're willing to listen as well, you know, and they can react very quickly, which is wonderful. And my background is also crisis communication. So if a tornado blew through, I would know how to deal with it. You know, just because of my experience with ice storms and other things, from a social media aspect. So I think I know how to deal with people and address their concerns. And that's what I guess is something I have as far as a skill is concerned.
10 seconds.
And I'll bring that forward to the constituents.
Thank you, John. To Pekka.
Hey, I ran in the last election back in 2018, and I've been working hard for 5 years in this riding. Throughout the pandemic, I've hosted numerous Zoom meetings on Black Lives Matter, climate change, education, they've all been open to the public. I've advertised asking for anyone who's interested to join us. If anyone here follows me on social media, they know that I answer everyone's responses, whether they agree with me or not. I treat them in a respectful way. I return all my phone calls. I've continued to knock on doors throughout these 5 years, and I've continued to reach out to people one-on-one, whether it's through Zoom, community outreach, or social media. I feel like it's my job to represent all voters, whether or not they voted for me, and to meet with people and hear from constituents. I've shown that over the last 5 years, and I'll continue to do that as your MPP.
Thank you, Pekka. Thank you all. This is actually Marlene's question. My apologies. And it's a good one. While it is great to have such agreement between our wonderful candidates here today, can you tell us what sets you and your party apart? And sorry, I think apart from the others is the end of that. So again, I'll repeat it. While it is great to have such agreement between our wonderful candidates, can you tell us what sets you and your party apart from the others? And we're going to start with Bonnie, please, if she's available. Or
yeah, I am, although I thought that for this question,
I'm sorry, it's Pekka.
Yeah.
My apologies. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Marlene. Hey, I think one thing that stands us apart from other parties, including the PCs who are not here, are respecting workers' rights. Whether you're a nurse, a carpenter, a framer, whether you're a gig worker at Georgian College who have gone out on strike over and over again. I remember in 2017, Georgian College professors were out for 5 weeks. They lost 5 weeks of wages. The Liberals brought in back to work legislation and imposed contracts on them. Can problems continue today? They just averted another strike 3 weeks ago. Teachers also faced the same situation. Liberals used back to work legislation, imposed contracts, took away banked sick days, and this action was deemed illegal by the Ontario Superior Court and was found to violate the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You know, workers' rights need to be respected if we're going to have a just recovery, as do our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So we're the party that respects workers' rights. You won't see us legislating people back to work, imposing contracts as they've done with Bill 124 and Bill 115. We respect workers' rights, skilled trades. I'd like to see more skilled trades people on the new Ontario Skilled Trades Board. And I'd like to see fair wage policies brought in across the province. You know, there are some jurisdictions like Toronto that have fair wage policies. I'd like to see those exact policies around the province.
Thank you, Pekka. Bonnie is next.
So one of the things that sets us apart from all the other parties, and I've mentioned it already, is that Greens are not whipped. So all of the candidates here can talk about the things that they personally would like to do, but unless their party approves of that, it doesn't matter. One of the things that I would say sets us apart from the other parties right now as well is that we were the first party in Ontario to publicly come out with a mental health care plan that is publicly covered through OHIP. And one of the other things that sets Greens apart is because we collaborate and we work together. I am thrilled to hear that the NDP in particular, I'm sorry, I don't know if the Liberals are talking about this, and I apologize for not knowing that, but the NDP is now talking about bringing mental health care into OHIP. We're glad when other parties adapt the ideas that Greens have, and that is often what happens. A lot of policies from the Greens work their way into the other political parties' policies. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't do such a good job of it. Like, for example, ODSP. Greens want to double the rates of ODSP immediately, whereas, as far as I'm aware, the NDP wants to phase it in.
10
No,
seconds.
poor people need money now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And to you, John, for this last question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I guess the one thing we have to remember is the Liberal Party was just about annihilated in the last election. I think they made the joke that the entire party would fit into a minivan. So when we talk, and I'm saying that as a joke, but the thing is, it's being rebuilt, and it's under a new leader, and we're looking at the mistakes from the past, and we're looking at that and saying, what more can we do to bring it forward? We're looking at the mistakes of the present government and saying, okay, what can we do? We're looking at the Green Party, and we're saying, like, listen, they have some great ideas. We're listening to the NDP, and yes, they have some great ideas too. So a lot of if you look at what our parties are doing, they're doing things that are very similar. But I think the Liberal Party, reborn, has the ability to push this through. And they have the infrastructure behind them. They have, members and other candidates that have experience. I'm new to the realm, but I have business experience and a background so that I can bring that forward. So I think, working with the party, a rejuvenated party, I think this will be a wonderful thing going forward.
Thank you, John. Thank you all. And we have a rebuttal from Bonnie. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that we haven't had a chance to talk about today. One of those things is we can't possibly have a just recovery in Ontario until we address the undemocratic voting system that we have. For eons, we have lived with a voting system that's practically ancient, that favors only two parties. And we can't do that anymore, especially in a landscape where we have multiple political parties. So we can't stop talking about electoral reform. We need proportionate representation at the provincial level. We need to do something about this. We can never hold our governments accountable if we can't realistically vote them out in the future. So here we are talking about the duopoly between the Liberals and the Conservatives in the media. Why? Because we don't have electoral reform in this province. So let's demand that of every single one of these candidates. And then I'm going to use my other rebuttal.
Thank you. Are you going to use it immediately, Bonnie, or would you like
Sure.
You'd like to use it immediately?
Well, unless John has one. Go ahead, John.
Only one per question. Only one per question.
Thank you, Margaret, for keeping me on track. So we do have another question, and I have a feeling that there will be a rebuttal for this one. So here's the question, and this one is near and dear to all of us, I think, in the Barrie Innisfil area. It stretches everywhere. In fact, it impacts all of us in the province of Ontario, but particularly in the Barrie Innisfil and even BSOM riding. Here's the question. The last few years have seen a surge in short-term rental accommodations called STAs in Innisfil, and quite frankly, as I just said, in many other municipalities across Ontario. There have been complaints of noise and partying at some of these houses, perhaps even the house next to you. There is further concern that these STAs will change the nature of many of these areas from livable, vibrant communities to a resort or even a ghost hotel community. And this one is a thorny one. How would you best manage, or what would you do, what would your party do to best manage STAs? And if I'm not mistaken, here's our lineup, and that is starting with John, and then with Pekka, and then with Bonnie. If that's I think that might be the last question. All right. Can we start with John, please?
Okay. STAs, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen them as we drive along the waterfront. There's a lot of action against it. People are posting signs. It's all, you see it everywhere. And it is a problem. It's definitely a problem. People are living, hopefully retiring in a beautiful little environment that they've been happy with, but next thing you know, they have weekenders coming in, and it happens at cottages as well. You know, there's people that rent their cottages out, and you know, you have these banshees, so to speak, that'll come out and they're got their motorboats running up and down the lakes and so on. So in Lake Simcoe, they come up here and then they're running all over the place. But you can't say, you know, within our area that we can control it. Now, from a provincial standpoint, I don't know if we can legislate that you can't have this, but it's more of a municipal aspect. I think they have to have bylaws in place. I think if you go provincially and say, no, you can't have this anymore, it could impact their tourism in certain areas. But if it's your next door neighbor and you're living in a subdivision and they're having these block parties, absolutely call the police and deal with
10
it.
seconds.
I think from a provincial aspect, I know it's a problem, but I don't know if we can address it from a provincial aspect.
Thank you, John. And I believe, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back to my notes. Forgive me. I think it was Pekka that was next. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, short-term rentals isn't something that I've heard a lot of concern about when I've been out door knocking. Not to say that it isn't a concern, but it's not one that's been brought to my attention often. I have heard about concerns about short-term rentals in reading local papers, letters to the editor from people there. I'd have to look at other jurisdictions to see how they handle that. We'd have to work in conjunction with the municipality to see how they would handle that. But I don't want to mislead anyone here and give you a definitive answer on what I would do on short-term rentals. I would have to look at the policy papers on that, talk to the municipality, and figure out from our platform how we would address that. So I'm not going to mislead anyone on that answer today.
Thank you, Pekka. And to Bonnie.
Yeah, so it's interesting that this question came up, and of course it's a problem. It's a problem everywhere in our province to one degree or another. I think if I lived next door to a short-term accommodation, I think that that would be extremely disturbing, not just on a personal level, but on an issue level. When a home is converted, usually by investors, into a short-term accommodation, it takes that home out of the housing supply. And so far, we're not doing such a good job of increasing our housing supply. And when investors are putting the money into these short-term accommodations specifically for that purpose, they're driving up housing affordability, to housing costs, and taking it out of affordability. So like Pekka, I would definitely work with the municipality to find out how to address these issues on an equitable way, not only to honor the fact that people are property owners and they do have some autonomy, but mostly to make sure that the community around those accommodations is preserved and that our homes are homes. There are all kinds of motels, hotels, and other types of accommodations that people can use in this area. And I really don't want to see a runaway development of these kind of accommodations.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you all. That's a hot button issue, and we're going to hear a lot more of that in the next few months. All right, that concludes, and I'm sorry, we have a rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. I just want to use my last rebuttal. So we didn't get a lot of opportunity to talk about the incredible losses that we experienced during this pandemic, the loss of our businesses, the loss of livelihood, the loss of income, but most importantly, the loss of lives. And the most horrific to me, because of the reasons it happened, is the loss of life in the long-term care centers. Those deaths, not entirely, but most of those deaths could have been prevented or mitigated had this government not been invested in making sure that their elite cronies could get involved in private long-term healthcare and cut back on PSW salaries and cut back on staffing. What happened should never happen again, but yet these same owners, these same private owners, are due to have all of their licenses renewed. This is unconscionable, and we need to change that, and Greens intend to change that. And as I've mentioned before, please go to gpo.ca to see what we have offered to deal with this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, we're just doing a quick tally here. By my account, everyone's now at 0 for their rebuttals. Is that your understanding as well? Okay, all right.
I thought John had one, didn't he?
Well, I think, John, you used both of them.
Oh,
but
sorry, my
correct me
apologies.
if I'm wrong, John. Is that correct in your estimation?
Actually, I felt I lost one when I had to respond to Pekka at the beginning, but that's okay. You know, I think I had my opportunity to speak and actually acknowledge the other candidates and say they're doing a good job.
All right, John. Thank you for that. Okay, we are almost at the very end. Our candidates, of course, and special thanks to our audience members who dropped in, listened, engaged, asked questions. I wish we could, keep this open and ask a lot of questions going forward. We do have a time limit here, but you do know how to reach your candidates, and you do know that at any time you can extend your questions to them personally. So I want to thank our audience members and our candidates, of course. And the candidates have the almost last word, and we are coming into closing comments at this point. So I'm going to ask in this order, please, Pekka, Bonnie, and then John, to give your closing remarks, and you have 2 minutes each, starting with Pekka.
First of all, Deb, I'd like to thank you for hosting tonight and for everyone who put this meeting together today. It's been wonderful to have this debate. We only have 2 debates in this riding, it seems like, so it's a really important debate to have tonight. In closing, I'd like to reaffirm my hope and my dedication to tackling the climate crisis, racism, inequality, and a just recovery. However, putting the onus on individuals, as we so often hear from the Conservatives, is not going to fix climate change or address just recovery. Expecting a strong corporate response will only delay climate change action, racism, and inequality. We really shouldn't be putting this responsibility on the shoulders of young people, expecting them to fix everything, including climate change. For example, my campaign manager, Tynan, who's only 20, or our volunteers, some of our key volunteers, Mel and Parker, who are only 17, or for my own 2 kids, Aaron and Luke, 20 and 24. It's my responsibility to take on climate change. If elected, I will have the power and the means to make a real difference for the future of Tynan, Mel, Parker, Luke, and Aaron on their behalf. Governments have to take the lead in tackling climate change, in tackling racism, and in tackling inequality. And that's why your vote on June 2nd is so important. And I hope everyone will get out and vote for the party that feels best represents them. Thank you also to John and Bonnie for your wonderful participation tonight, and I look forward to the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pekka. And to Bonnie, please, for closing comments.
I'm determined to ensure my son Gary and all of you, your children and your families for generations to come, will inherit a livable, green, and caring planet, a world built on genuine compassion and equity. I know how it feels to be powerless, but I also know how it feels to accomplish positive change. So let's talk about an example of that. Let's talk about how one person can create that change, and then how all of us can work collaboratively together to make it happen. In 2018, the hottest summer in 262 years saw wildfires and deadly heat waves in Sweden. A 9th grader named Greta Thunberg sat alone on a sidewalk holding a homemade protest sign. Facing an upcoming election, she demanded Sweden's politicians to act to stop climate change. Greta inspired a global movement to save the planet for all of us, the powerful and the powerless, the young and the old. Barely 4 years later, millions have taken to the streets worldwide, carrying her simple message, save our planet now. All of you have the power to change the world. And all of us are here today to take your message to Queen's Park. You're here today to show us how. I'm Bonnie North, your green choice for MPP in Barrie Innisfil, and I want to go to work for you. There's no time left to waste. The best time to act was 50 years ago. The next best time to act is now. Thank you so much to the Just Recovery team and all of the candidates, and thank you to you for coming.
Thank you, Bonnie. And to John, please, for closing comments.
Yeah, thank you I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I know I came in late and probably ill-prepared, but it was a wonderful opportunity to get us out there, at least to introduce ourselves. And I might just take a moment just to introduce a little bit more about myself. As I said, I've been in the area for 37 years. I've been in customer communications, marketing, crisis management for over 30. I'm active in the community, but I come, my background too is like my father was actually born in Indonesia, Dutch East Indies. He spent basically puberty in a concentration camp wearing nothing but a loincloth. My mom, my family came from the Ukraine and immigrated here in the late 1800s and were parachuted into Manitoba, where they were grouped and said, basically, you're on your own and try and establish yourself here. So, which they did. And so I come from a family of really strong and I would say resilient people that can, work together, bring things together. They taught me to be a good young boy and, and come forward. Now I'm a 62-year-old man. But I want to bring, that kind of old school but new school kind of approach. I have 5 kids, basically, 4 of my own and 1 with my wife, Gail, and 2 grandchildren. So I got to build a good life for them. I want them to succeed. I think I've succeeded over the years, and many have. But I've also tried to give back. And that's important, whether it be through the food bank. I grow vegetables in my side yard and I donate it to the food bank and to the seniors' homes. And because someday I'll be a senior and I'll be looking for tomatoes and just for a little treat. So, I just want to be like, I am a person. I'm not the big, bad liberal guy. So I want to bring that, this is a little bit like a hometown kind of thing that is growing, and we have to grow in a proper manner. And I think I can do that.
Thank you, John. Thank you all. We are coming to the close of this, and I thank you very much to our audience, as I said earlier, and especially to our candidates for sharing their time with us, for showing up. And, Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up, and I never dispute that, showing up and participating in this. I especially want to thank Margaret Prophet and Adam Balla. They did all the heavy lifting. It's all theirs. I just got to speak as your moderator, and I'm very honored to be able to do that. We appreciate, especially our candidates, the amount of time and work it takes to run a campaign, and we wish you all the very best. To our audience and to everyone who's listening, and to our candidates, we hope that this discussion has helped illuminate voters across our riding and to inform their choices. We appreciate that the decline of our environment and climate is distressing and, quite frankly, frightening. However, we have the power to participate in democracy to insist that the choices we make in the future support a livable planet and healthy communities. So the first thing we need to do is we need to encourage each of you to vote and encourage others to vote as well. Change can't happen any other way. The advanced polls open, I think it's next Thursday, May the 19th. And our official voting day is fast approaching on June the 2nd. Beyond voting, Continue to connect with your future MPPs and hold them accountable to the promises they made here in this debate and the promises they're making throughout the campaign. They cannot represent people adequately if they never hear from them. This video recording will be hosted on Just Recovery Simcoe's YouTube channel. And I wanted to also give a shout out to, I believe it was Julie Johnson. I'm just checking in my chat here, lots to Julie Johnson, who's the coordinator for JRS. There's another shout out and a big thank you to those who were involved. A lot of people in the background here, a lot of people in the candidates' background as well, as you alluded to. So again, the recording will be available on the Just Recovery Simcoe YouTube channel, and JRS will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered here today. You'll get the link and you can share it with your own network. And as I said before, if you didn't get your questions asked, and we only had so much time here today, so we appreciate that, or if you still have more questions, reach out and ask them if they will come to your door and sit down and have a conversation with you. That's the only way that change happens, is if we do this face to face and we continue to engage and inquire and ask the good questions. We've heard a lot of great questions and a lot of comments today. And I wish that these were longer. We've done a few of these, 100 debates on the environment and municipal coming up in November. And they're never easy. And the questions were specifically designed to get, we hope, people thinking, engaging, and asking more questions. So thank you. Thank you for the honor of being your moderator. Thank you to everyone who participated. In closing, I know Margaret has a very famous quote from Margaret Mead. I am a big fan of Eleanor Roosevelt, believe it or not. And here's the quote I'd like to share with you of hers. And it's a doozy. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. So keep dreaming, keep planning. As candidates, you have to keep planning and keep knocking on doors. And we wish you every success in your upcoming campaign. It's a short one, so we appreciate it. And yes, thank you again to Margaret and to Adam for keeping us on schedule. We're actually a couple of minutes ahead of schedule. I'd like to just check in with Margaret to see if we'd like to sign off a couple minutes early, or if there are any other comments for the good of this Just Recovery Simcoe Barrie Innisfil riding debate.
No, I think we're good. We're 1:59 now, so I think the candidates have been sitting long enough and probably would like to get up for a stretch along with everybody else. So if that's amenable to everyone. Sorry, Bonnie, do you have something?
I just wanted to, and I really appreciate you saying to the people out there to reach out to all of us. Is there any way that you can post on your website how people can reach out to us?
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. When we load the video, we'll put the contact information for the parties in the show notes.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
That's a great question. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Pekka. Thank you, John. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the sunshine. Best of luck on the trail.